Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, this crash in Washington, D.C. area between a Black Hawk helicopter and American Airlines jet is just such a tragic thing, just such a horrific thing, because we as consumers, individuals, we take flights all the time and we just expect there to be safety and for things like this never to happen. And when they do happen, it is a rare event. I mean, for the millions and millions of flights that cross the skies every year, thousands of flights every day, airline safety is pretty darn good, you know. But it's almost, when we think about it, inexcusable for a single mistake, because the ramifications to a single mistake, and this a tragic, tragic mistake, in this incident, are the loss of 67 lives snuffed out. Some outstanding people, wonderful human beings, you know, Olympic skaters and the Army Black Hawk helicopter, the three individuals that were on that, undoubtedly outstanding human beings. So it hits us hard. And we question and we want to know the answers. But I just want everyone to think about that we can't know the answers immediately. And there has been some media almost giving the answers already. And I just want you to know, perhaps their conclusions may be close to the final conclusions that will take about a year to come by the National Transportation Safety Board to put this and do a detailed investigation and come to their conclusions. Will take about a year. But now they're coming out with some what they would consider to be conclusions right away. And we don't know if what they're asking. There's a lot of talking heads, some brilliant talking heads on all the stations, former pilots, former Black Hawk pilots, former air traffic controllers. And in some way, maybe they'll come close to what the investigative conclusion is in 1 year from now. But what we always preach on this channel is good investigation takes time. So folks, hold on to your hats. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on to your wig. Hold on to your toupee. Hold on to your drink. Hold on to your thoughts. Don't come to any conclusions. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone. The police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make game the day action count a little bit more. Make game day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joining me today, of course, is the man of reason, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Mike,
Bill,
welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Bill. Good to see you. Good afternoon.
You know, Mike, again, when we personalize this and we think of the human beings that were on these planes and the tragedy that it is, what we all want to know is why. And is it like an American thing or a human thing to want to assign blame? Is it, Mike?
Yeah, Billy, I think it is. I think because that's part of the why. We want to understand. We don't want to just say, well, you know, it was sooner or later, it's going to happen no matter how safe our transportation system is, our airline system is. There's always going to be a tragedy. And that's true. And we understand that. And that's intellectual. But emotionally, when it happens, we want to know why. And we do want to kind of point out to one thing to say, there's a mistake that usually a human made. And therefore, it explains everything. And we kind of put the onus on one person. That's a human thing. It's unfortunate. And especially in this communications world that we have, where you have so many, content makers and all the traditional media, and it's 24/7 coverage, and everyone's looking for an extra piece of information, more information, something that they could run with. And sadly, we tend to want to blame someone rather than the overall system that they are operating in. So I hope no one really rushes to conclusion with this.
Absolutely. Pamela White, thank you so much. I appreciate your wisdom in finding out the truth, no matter how long it takes. Thank you for the $5 super sticker. Folks, in staying with that theme of assigning blame, I just want to put out there what the New York Times is saying. And I'm not saying they're trying to come out with what they know so far to be the facts. And in their headline today, helicopter may have deviated from approved path before deadly crash. The Army Black Hawk is said to have been flying higher than it should have been when it collided with a passenger jet, killing 67 people. And the air traffic controller on duty was doing a job usually handled by 2 people. An Army helicopter may have deviated from its approved flight path before its deadly collision with an American jet over the Potomac River. The latest details to emerge as investigators combed the crash site for clues. The collision happened on Wednesday night as the plane approached Reagan National Airport, where staffing at the air traffic control tower was not normal, according to a preliminary report by the Federal Aviation Administration. The crash killed 67 people, whose bodies were being recovered from the icy waters of the Potomac in a massive search operation. Details about the UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter's final location indicated that it was not on its approved route and flying higher above the ground as it traversed the busy airspace just outside the nation's capital, according to 4 people briefed on the matter but not authorized to speak publicly. The internal FAA report, which was reviewed by the New York Times, said the controller who was handling helicopters in the airport's vicinity on Wednesday night was also instructing planes that were landing and departing from its runways, jobs typically assigned to 2 different controllers. A supervisor combined those duties sometime before 9:30 p.m. and allowed 1 controller to leave, according to a person briefed on the staffing who was not authorized to speak publicly. Now, there's at least 2 things that they're obviously asking the question. Was the fact that there was only 1 air traffic controller when there's usually 2, did that have anything to do with this crash? Allegation 2, the helicopter was flying lower than it should have been. Did that have anything to do with this crash? So these are 2 things that the New York Times is pointing out that we don't know whether or not, in fact, it had anything to do with this, but they're pointing out some viable things that could have contributed to this, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, and some of these are like what I would call institutionalized, because I've heard that the manning for the air traffic controllers and the personnel are down about almost a third in the DC area in that airport. So they may not have had enough people to actually cover the jobs, and so therefore that may have been contributed to work overload at a critical moment like this. And that is, again, that's something that's not one particular person's fault. That's the institution that within which everyone is working. Staffing levels are low. We need to increase them. Of course, now it's too late, but we need to increase them before this happens again. No one probably understood that the traffic staffing was low, and because there was no consequence. We've talked about this with like the fires in LA. You can gut the fire department and nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to notice it until tragedy strikes. And then you have a disaster on your hands. Here, perhaps the same thing. The air traffic controllers are probably so good at their job that they were doing, the work of several people when they weren't supposed to be doing. They got away with it in the institution, at the airport. And then, unfortunately, there was other previous issues, but there was never a tragedy like this. So therefore, maybe that systemic issue of funding and training and getting new people in place at that airport, that's one of the things that we now see and that we have to analyze to see where do we go now going forward. There's a number of things that you can do. We can learn from this because you got to learn from this tragedy and you got to move on.
Absolutely. Sounding six. Thank you. I made a mistake. Sounding six. You're 100% correct. I checked. I misspoke. The helicopter was flying higher than they should have been. You're absolutely 100% right. And sounding six. Thank you for correcting me. Hawkeyes, thank you for the $9.99 super sticker. Do you think this could be overtaking the aircraft? There's a different reports. They're saying, initially, I think the media said that the plane hit the helicopter, and apparently it's the other way around. The helicopter hit the plane. And, what everyone wants to know, of course, was this, and it seems, and again, it'll take the NTSB a year to come to their conclusions. It seems that there was human error in this horrific accident, right? People mention visibility, and that's a big thing. But most of the time, I believe that, airlines pilots, and they fly a very specific path when landing at an airport, unless they're diverted by air traffic control for some reason. So the chances are, and again, I am no aviation expert, but the plane was where it should have been. So then do we surmise, and again, with absolutely not enough information to say then if the plane was in the right place, therefore the helicopter must not have been, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, in a prima facie look, first blush look at this, it seemed like the airliner, the American airliner, was where it was supposed to be. It was at the level it was supposed to be. And it was in the direction that it was supposed to be to land on a particular runway assigned to it. And that is golden. You've got to follow that. And perhaps, as you see there, the helicopter was higher than it should have been. And maybe there was some sort of visibility issues. And on top of that, you have the doctrine that civilian aviation flying into that airport has to take precedence over, military training around that airport. And the sad part is that training seems to have gone on many times during very busy hours, not at, like, say, a Sunday morning at 3 a.m., but, on a Wednesday evening during the week when you've got the nation's capital there and people are flying in and out all the time. There's a lot of factors that have contributed to this, but I think probably just based on a first look at it, it looks like the American Airlines pilot was where he was supposed to be at the height he was supposed to be going in the direction where he was supposed to be.
Absolutely. Bob Gable, the helicopter ran right into it. Bob, if that's true, then there was some visibility problems, but apparently there was another aircraft right near where the plane was. And perhaps the Black Hawk saw that plane and didn't see the second plane. And this horrific accident occurred. I want to play a former Black Hawk helicopter pilot on CNN.
Elizabeth, let me start with you. An Army pilot who has flown Black Hawk helicopters like you in this area around Reagan National Airport told CNN's reporter Haley Pritsky that the Army's flights are routinely planned down to the tiniest detail. This pilot said that based on the risk, the briefer will approve or disapprove parts of the flight plan That assessment is then run by the unit's commander, then submitted to the FAA. So if it went through all of those levels, the question, of course, is just how could this have happened?
Well, I believe there's three things that happened. If it had just been one, it wouldn't have been an issue, but three different things happened. First of all, they only had a crew of 3. And if you're flying a visual flight plan in a crowded airspace like this, they really should have had 2 crew chiefs in the back of the helicopter to clear each side, as the pilots only have visibility from straight ahead 12 to 3 o'clock, or 12 from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So you only have visibility of the front 180 degrees. Your crew chiefs clear the back. If you only have 1 crew chief, how much can you clear? So I think that was a major issue.
So
as
that's
well
interesting.
As the, yeah, go ahead.
Keep going. Well, so are you saying instead of a crew of 3, it should have been a crew of 4? How many people should have been on the helicopter? And then please continue with your other 2 points.
Yes, so 3 is a minimum crew for a Black Hawk helicopter. In my opinion, when you're going into visual flight mode in a crowded airspace like this, it should be a minimum of 4. So you have a pilot on each side for visibility. That's the first one. The second one is, it is, whether they were on night vision goggles at that time or not, it is a very cluttered airspace with a lot of lighting and the lights reflecting on the river. And so with that, it's easy to kind of get a little disoriented as far as the height. They were supposed to be at 200 feet, which is the helicopter routing in that area, and it wouldn't have been a conflict, but they were not at 200 feet. Obviously, reportedly, the incident happened at around 350 to 400 feet as the airliner was descending. So that they were at the wrong height. So that's a pilot error. The first would be a policy error or choice. And then the third is air traffic control said, do you have the CRJ in sight? Well, there were two aircraft in their field of view, and actually only one was really obvious to them. And that was if you watch the video, the aircraft taking off in the foreground is probably the one they were facing, the pilots were facing, and said, yeah, I got it. The air traffic control should have said, do you have the aircraft at 5 o'clock? So they were looking at the rear. If they had done that, the Black Hawk is maneuverable. The Black Hawk could have moved out of the way quickly. They can move on a dime and make that happen. And it wouldn't have happened.
Cedric, that's one of the most informed explanations I've heard of what possibly went wrong that I've yet. Thank you so much for that. Do you agree with what you had to say?
Yeah, basically I do, Jake. Elizabeth has obviously a wealth of experience with this. And when you look at the way in which the crews are set up for Black Hawk helicopters, that's a critical thing. You know, you've got the mission planning piece that you mentioned, and as Elizabeth was explaining, there are also so many concerns that they have to really look at, including not only the weather and not only air traffic considerations, but also what kind of things they can expect in terms of topographical features and things like that. And that should be a given. But there are things that change sometimes. Sometimes there's new construction and things like that. And so they have to have as much meticulous planning as possible. And if that planning isn't taken into consideration and isn't done in the right way, then of course there could be significant consequences. Not saying that happened here, of course.
Right. We don't know. We're just trying to make informed observations about what possibly happened. Obviously, Elizabeth says that the Black Hawk was supposed to be at 200 feet, and it was actually at 350. Right. Is that easy? Is that a mistake that's easy to make to be at 350 when you think you're at 200 feet?
Not normally, because the altimeter, which measures your altitude, is supposed to be calibrated to be exact, and you should never fly an aircraft that doesn't have that kind of an instrument calibrated properly. So that should not happen. If they, for some reason flew at 300 instead of 200, that could be a significant issue, and that could explain why they were flying, where they were flying, and at what altitude they were flying. So it is a significant thing that the NTSB is definitely going to have to look at.
All right, fascinating stuff.
So, Mike, they're asking again, some of the questions being asked here is, well, how come they didn't know they were too high? Was their altimeter, did it malfunction? Did they not know that they were at least 100 feet higher than they were supposed to be? These are questions that will be part of the NTSB investigation. And again, we don't have immediate answers to these questions now, nor does the media. Of course, they want to, but these questions will be answered via, the black boxes in the helicopter, black boxes in the American Airlines jet, and also through the interview of people, observations, video, air traffic controllers. All of this will become part of this massive investigation, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, it was really good that CNN had the two former Black Hawk helicopter pilots, because it helps the public, you and me and everyone else, understand what questions are going to be asked about the equipment, about the number of people on board, about what their jobs were, about visibility, about confusion at that critical juncture when there seemed to be a lot of different factors coming into play, going right past a runway. They were right there, right at the airport. They could see one plane maybe ascending, did not see the plane descending. There's a lot of questions. And like when you've done homicide investigations, you know how long these things take and all the questions that a district attorney is going to ask you to make sure that before they make an arrest. Same thing here. Before they come to a conclusion, the NTSB wants to close every loop, tie up every end, and make sure that when they do come up with a final report, that it's as accurate as humanly possible in this case, because this is what we're going to learn from. This may change Army protocol from Fort Belvoir, I think it's how you pronounce it, that covers that area. That's their training area. They claim that they need to have pilots train in this area because that's part of their mission, to fly in and out of that area. So they can't go flying off in some deserted area, like say in Montana, where you can be far away from people. All of these things are going to now have to be looked at, and some protocols will absolutely be changed.
Absolutely. There's some good, there's really knowledgeable people in the chat.
Yeah,
and I want to give them their due, because I appreciate when we do have Christine in the chat. Northside, I was wondering the same thing. Why were they training near busy civilian airspace? Christine, I think I'm going to try to pull up the video of Hegseth when he talks about why they were doing that. That's a great question to ask. Tiny Dancer, it's not something you forget. I'm not sure what you're responding to there. Angie Mortz at Fairy Tale Lane writes, so if the student driver doesn't react, the other one should be able to, or at least alert. There are two sets of eyes. I think you're referring probably to the pilots and the fact that they're saying now there should have been 4 crew on that Black Hawk and not 3. And that, again, could be, when we point at things that could be a cause, that absolutely could be. And not saying it is. Tiny Dancer, the Pentagon said the lead pilot had 1,000 hours on that airframe, which qualifies him as highly experienced. So as to why they were training in that area, let me see if I can get this from Pete Hegseth.
Foremost from the Defense Department, want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls and their families that were affected by this. Never should happen. And certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, young captain, staff sergeant, and CW2, chief warrant officer, on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission. The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DOD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top tier aviation assets inside the DOD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable. But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DOD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible, whether it's flying Black Hawks and flying airplanes, leading platoons, or in government. The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control, or whether it's in our generals, or whether it's throughout government. So thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir, and we'll stand by you on it. Thank you.
So that was Pete Hegseth, and he sort of answered as to why they were doing this training mission in that area. I don't know if that satisfies a lot of people, as it's sort of putting people in danger. You know, when you're flying in this busy airspace and doing a training mission, we, the layman, would immediately ask, well, why was it necessary to do that specific training in that specific area at that specific time when it was beyond busy? Mike.
Yeah, Bill, that's one of the things that we talked about before the show, and I came to that conclusion. You could do this training, couldn't you, at 2:00 in the morning when a lot of the flights, there's nobody coming in that hour, and you have a lot more leeway in terms of flying with your helicopter up and down, familiarizing the crews and the pilots with their mission. Pete Hegseth says it's a continuation of government mission, which means they are required to learn how to fly in and out of that area in case there's a national emergency, and you got to get dignitaries in there critically quickly or remove them quickly. And so you got to be able to know that airspace like the back of your hand, know that topography like the back of your hand. But I just question the routineness of doing it at those hours, not the intelligence of doing it. Absolutely, it's critical, mission critical, but you have to figure out a better time to do it than at that hour of the afternoon in the middle of a work day. You know, a work day evening, I don't see it. And I question that. Again, not one single person's to blame. This has probably been going on since at least 9/11. So that's 24 years.
Absolutely. Hawkeye's North Star, I feel the same. It looked deliberate. That's why it reminds me of 2025. Starting out so strange. Yeah. Angie Mortz, I feel like ATC should have used better verbiage and been more clear. Yeah, I think you're right. Tiny Dancer, I said I got straight up strafed by a Black Hawk that cleared the barracks by about 20 feet at Camp Pendleton. It's not something you'll ever forget if it happens to you. Tiny Dancer, thank you for sharing your service, and thank you for your service. North Star, I never understood nighttime head-on crashes until I almost had one happen to me. It's hard to know which lane the lights are in. Sounding 6, they've been doing it for decades. We have a lot more planes in the air these days and less ATC to manage them. Air traffic control, 100%. And think of the job of an air traffic controller. It is beyond difficult. And when they talk about the best and the brightest, and, you know, even the amount of hours they work and the amount of probably mandated breaks they need to take during their tour of duty, because I would imagine your eyes and your brain and everything, you need total concentration. And I know that at times, I'm sure they work overtime because there's not enough of them, you know, and they have air traffic control unions, and I think the Times did point a finger at the air traffic control, and not saying it was his or her fault, but that they were working with one person when there should have been two. So if they were pointing a finger at them, that is, you know, a possibility. Should there have been two? Well, maybe, but in how many days of the year do you think that happens when there's only one? And as long as nothing happens, it never becomes an issue. But something did happen here. Something happened very bad. I want to play this from News Nation.
Scott, was about 10 minutes ago. We learned that now 41 bodies have been pulled from that wreckage. What does that tell you now that crews are back out there today about the speed at which this investigation is happening?
On one level, the speed is very fast because they have the black boxes. They can decipher what's in them. But the physical problems that you're going to encounter now are not going to be fast at all. The extraction of evidence, the preservation of evidence, and of course the remaining bodies and the remains to be removed from the river, they're not all in one location. There's a debris field that is moving. You see the current in the water there. They have to accommodate that. That may take a couple more days.
Yeah, and if my math is correct, 26 more bodies left to be pulled. You and I were on air first thing yesterday morning. It's now been 36 hours later. We've learned a lot, but at the same time, learned very little. What are your biggest questions that you still have and biggest observations that you've made from our reporting?
It all gets back down to restricted airspace. What was that helicopter doing anywhere near a glide slope of an incoming flight? Whatever his altitude may have been, why was he that close to that airport at that time? Even though it was a training mission, they're going to have to deal with those rules and maybe adjust them. What did the helicopter pilot actually see when the tower said to him, "Be aware of traffic in the area"? And then he acknowledged the traffic, but was it that traffic? What could have been another?
Yeah, because he did give the affirmative. So,
Yes.
But what was he talking
And
about?
once
Right.
you do that, the controller knows, okay, we've solved that problem. We'll deal with other issues. But was it that plane? Hopefully, we'll find that answer.
Yeah, and you don't think we're getting fast answers?
Fast again. The media is demanding fast answers. That's not accurate answers. All right. You want speed? Okay, we'll give you speed, but that doesn't mean that includes accuracy. All right. And that's the world we live in. We want immediate gratification. You want an accurate report. You want a good investigation. All right. We're going to get preliminary investigation out there. That's close, but it's not going to be 100% accurate. The only accuracy we're going to get is 1 year from now when the NTSB puts out their report, because that's how long it takes to put together an accurate report. And I know none of us have patience to wait for that. And I would imagine especially the families of the victims. They don't want to hear about a year from now. But again, when we're looking at an accurate investigation, it's going to take a year from now, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, this is the problem with our 24/7 news cycle is everybody wants answers. Now they're going to get suppositions, they're going to get rumors, they're going to get, innuendo, and they need to have something to run with at the top of every hour, to say, okay, news alert, this is what we've learned. The problem is this is a homicide investigation. We're not thinking we're going to lock someone up for murder or manslaughter, but this is a homicide investigation. People acted, humans acted, and the result is that there are like 67 people supposedly dead, and we haven't recovered the remains of all those people. This is a homicide investigation. There should not be this sort of demand on people for like a news bit every 5 minutes and update us. But that's unfortunately the world we live in terms of the news. But as you say, we're going to have to be patient, and people got to realize, as a homicide investigation, this has to be as thorough as any other homicide investigation that you may have ever done in your career or any law enforcement ever does in their career. You need as many possible answers as you can have so we can understand completely what happened that last Wednesday evening.
Absolutely. Emily's dismantling the Lulus. What a name. Great name. I believe the military bears responsibility. They are trained to handle situations where maneuvering a helicopter with night vision is necessary. It's difficult to understand how they failed. Yes, it is. And again, we as the public, we as citizens, we as civilians, we want and need sometimes to assign blame. Who's at fault here? And preliminarily, it looks like it was human error, that there was numerous mistakes here, not one mistake, but numerous mistakes. Will the blame be spread around? And it doesn't look like a hell of a lot of blame goes toward the American Airlines flight that was probably in a preconceived flight plan looking to land, minutes, seconds away from landing, and this tragedy occurred. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Hit the like button. Share us with your friends and family. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon. with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can become part of the Police Off the Cuff family by joining our YouTube channel. I'm going to go back to the News Nation report.
Well,
Here.
we shouldn't get fast answers. We need to take our time.
Yeah. Let me bring in somebody that you know very well, former senior investigator for the NTSB, Greg Fife. Greg, good morning to you. Once again, I understand that you and Peter worked on some 15 different crashes together, when you were at the NTSB. Are you in agreement that we're probably not and shouldn't get fast answers here?
Yes, the whole process of acts investigation must be thorough and methodical. As the chairman talked about yesterday, she was concerned about the fact that a lot of the media and, of course, internet trolls that want to have instant answers, they think that they have, based on factoids, the ability to come up with conclusions. Yet the facts, conditions, and circumstances have not been developed yet. They are just now in the process. And now with the recovery of both the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, that's going to provide a lot of information, which could change the way we've all been thinking based on this early information that's developed over the past 36 hours.
Yeah, those are going to give us some clues.
Greg, you and I go back a long time. And one of the things that people don't understand about the process of accident investigation is the painstaking work that actually takes place in the water now. Greg was the lead investigator in that terrible crash of the Value Jet plane back in 1996 in the Florida Everglades. And that took weeks of painstaking work to recover that evidence. Here you have a river situation where the wreckage is still there, but the debris field may be moving, correct?
Absolutely. And when you look at that, Peter, the evidence documenting it as it is right now, even though there is victim recovery going on, is critical, because once they do get the wreckage out and lay it out, the critical part of all of this is converging angles and, of course, impact angles. How did the helicopter actually strike the regional jet? Was it from behind, where the crew of the regional jet had no idea that the helicopter was overtaking them in a parallel or even a perpendicular flight path? The other thing is that the information coming off the cockpit voice recorder is going to be extremely important. The flight data recorder just tells you where the aircraft is at any point in time and space and what it's doing. But it's the cockpit voice recorder, because you're going to hear the conversations between both flight crews. What did they see? What did they acknowledge? What did they believe? And like you said, Peter, words have meaning. And so when the air traffic controller called the traffic and said, "Do you have the RJ in sight?" If you listen to the response, the military crew never said, "We have the RJ in sight." They said, "We have an aircraft, we have the aircraft in sight." Well, there were 3 other aircraft in that area, including an RJ that had just taken off. So that's going to be critical to listen and hopefully get some answers to what traffic they were actually looking at, because it's apparent that they did not identify the aircraft that they struck probably as the traffic that was being called by the air traffic controller.
Well said. Everyone with media and with YouTube and with everyone's an expert. Everyone's a genius. Everyone knows all about this stuff. And I'll tell you right now, I know nothing about aviation protocols. I know nothing about flying a plane, flying a helicopter. So when I hear experts like this, former NTSB people, and talk about the thoroughness of an investigation, and whether you're investigating a homicide, an aviation accident, a robbery, a burglary, investigation is pretty much the same as far as following the steps to a logical conclusion, but using the evidence to tell you and direct you to what the logical conclusion is. And when we have people 2 days after an event start saying, "This is what happened," you got to slow these people down and say, "Wait a minute." And that goes for politicians. That goes for talking heads. That goes for the media. Slow them down, because we don't have all the information yet.
Yeah, Bill, this is painstaking work, and it's going to take quite a long period of time. As mentioned, they're going to try to pull up as many pieces of that aircraft as they can. They're going to probably take some deserted hangar somewhere and actually try to put it together again. I remember seeing them do that at a hangar out in Long Island after that plane crashed off the coast of New York back in like 2002. And they find pieces the size of a loaf of bread and pieces the size of a Humvee, and they put them together and try to figure out, reconstruct the whole thing. That's a long time, you know. And then also you have the issue of, where do we go from here? You know, that's a whole other thing. And I think we shouldn't be thinking about where do we go from here until after we know what got us here. What got us here? What are the things that failed us in terms of our systems, our protocols, you know, pilot error possibly. So we should know where we are and figure all that out first before anybody says, I know what we should do now. This is what we should do. Cancel all flights, do this, do that. You know, we can think about these things, but you know, you have to have a lot of flexibility in your thinking, because we don't know exactly what happened, and how it actually happened. We don't know that yet. So people, you know, everyone, you, me, and everyone else, we have to be patient and let the course of the investigation unfold. Don't listen to rumors. You know, don't listen to content creators that make logical leaps about what they think happened. So this is something that needs to take a long time so that it's true and accurate as it possibly can be.
Absolutely. Helen, the Scottish Llama. At Angie Mort's, the controller got a collision alert, which is why he went back to the helicopter. The CRJ was on final, so you don't want to interrupt that. You know, we have some very informed and very knowledgeable people in the chat. And sounding 6, a preventable accident. Yeah, I mean, it seems this, again, was human error. It seems that way now. Which most accidents are human error. Some of them come back as mechanical error, but this one from an early, and again, I don't want to jump at conclusions either, because I'll be as guilty as the people I'm pointing my finger at. I don't think you want to come back and say what it is yet. Angie Mortz, Helen, the Scottish Llama, thank you for that info. I didn't know the controller got a collision alert. I do feel like they weren't clear with the instructions for the helo. Sounding 6 at Fairy Tale Lane. I don't think the helo pilot intended to crash into the plane. That would be hard to do for a human, but they were flying much higher than allowed on the course. You know, Sounding 6, thank you for your comments. I think that we are going to learn these things again. We're not going to get instant information. You know, Nora from the chat, have all 67 souls lost been recovered? Waist deep freezing water, right? Hard, difficult tasks of specialized teams. Have my respect for choosing a job. Rest in peace, Q, multiple HR. You know something, Nora, one of my good friends is retired FBI agent Bobby Chacon, who's probably been on all the TV stations as a talking head. He was in charge of the FBI scuba team. So he did a lot of this type of work. Got to be horrific work. You know, from a human's perspective, I want to play this from ABC News.
This tragedy had a devastating impact on the figure skating community. 14 skaters, coaches, and family members were among those killed. ABC's Ariel Reshef has more on this tight-knit family now in mourning.
The skating world reeling in loss. 6 members of the Skating Club of Boston in Norwood, Massachusetts, killed on the ill-fated American Airlines flight.
And then when you find out, you know some of the people on the plane, is even a bigger blow.
The club, a home away from home for Olympians like Nancy Kerrigan, who gathered at the rink to remember the young athletes and coaches.
If I could do anything for somebody, that I just wanted to be there to do it.
All of the skaters and coaches had been in Wichita at a development camp that took place immediately following the U.S. National Championships. 16-year-old Spencer Lane posted this last TikTok performing a flawless triple toe loop at camp.
He started to discover this connection with the audience and that joy that he was giving to other people through his gift. And he said, please let me skate again with you next year.
The skating phenom also sharing this haunting picture from inside the plane, bound for D.C. just before takeoff. His dad, Douglas, speaking with WCVB about the pain of losing both his son and his wife.
I just happened to open like a news browser and saw a small plane in the Potomac, and I was just like, oh my God, and my heart just started like exploding out of my chest.
Spencer's teammates remembering his raw talent.
He was a little fireball. He was a little firecracker. That's the best way to put it.
The club also paying tribute to 13-year-old Gina Han, seen here competing just last month.
Gina was a very energetic child. Whenever you meet her, you met her in the morning, say hi, and you just see this smiling girl.
Han's mother, Jin, also on the plane, along with her coaches, Jenya Shishkova and Vadim Namov, former world champions. The skating community hoping the lessons they've learned on the ice will help give them the strength to face the future.
Even when it's hard, you get back up. Even when you're crying, hurt, pain, you get back up and move forward. It's not easy, but that's what we all have to do now together.
And that's what skaters are taught to do from such a young age. Deep grief felt through the entire world of skating and beyond. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee echoing, there are truly no words to capture the depth of our sorrow. A moment of silence was held at the European Figure Skating Championships to remember those lost.
So horrible, man. When you put that human face on it, it gets to be, it really hits home. You know, it really hits home. The poor man who lost his wife and his son, just unimaginable grief, you know. And when you get back to the stakes in this, of course, what we're talking about is the investigation and how important it is to people like that we just saw, the young skaters and their families, the one man who lost his wife and his son. Just absolutely horrific, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, sometimes we forget, we take for granted how great our transportation system is and how great the FAA is getting everybody, as much as we don't like getting on the planes and the seats are too small, there's not enough headroom and legroom, and you feel crowded and cramped, and you got to go from one end of the terminal in an airport to the other to catch a connecting flight, all that sort of stuff. But we have the most advanced and amazing system, because you can see every day, there's 1 million people flying across America. On the holidays, you may have 10 million people flying, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I can tell you, I drive from Yonkers to New Haven every day. And in Connecticut, they average about 300 deaths from traffic accidents every single year. The number's like 310. We don't have that in America in terms of our entire nation when it comes to an airline crash, because it happens so infrequently. We're blessed with the people who work so hard to make everything really, between our pilots, the air traffic controllers, the maintenance people, they do an amazing job. And unfortunately, we forget how difficult the job is until we get a tragedy like this. And then we see the names and the faces of the people. That's really hard. But we should, think about them and keep them in our prayers. But we should not look to scapegoat somebody, because we do have an amazing aviation system in a country.
Absolutely. Tiny Dancer. 15 million people go through that airport annually. Well, yeah, to put the numbers on it, amazing. And I don't have the numbers of how many people fly per year. But when we know that, and it's millions and millions, maybe 150 million, I don't know exactly, but there's very few aviation accidents. But if you lost a loved one on this flight, then aviation accidents are up 100% in regards to you. And you don't want to hear how safe it is. This was from Good Morning America with George Stephanopoulos interviewed an NTSB official. I just wanted to play a bit of this.
Member of the NTSB, Todd Inman. Mr. Inman, thank you for joining us this morning. Did you learn anything new overnight?
Well, we've had a pretty good development in regard to recovery of not only the voice recorder, but the data recorder. Both of them have been pulled from the CRJ 700 and are currently in our lab. So we're starting the process of not only opening those up, but to begin the extraction of the data, which is a good start to being able to put together one of the very many pieces of this puzzle.
That's just the beginning. You haven't determined anything from those black boxes yet?
No, it will take several days. The data recorder itself has thousands of data points, and they all have to be synchronized against a lot of other things that happened in the plane. The voice recorders actually have to be what's called auditioned among a number of people so that there's complete agreement of how the transcript will come out. And we also look for ancillary noises, maybe a boom or a thud or a crack or something in the cockpit. So those things are going on concurrently, along with the fact we have several hundred people in the field looking at every other aspect of this investigation.
From what you've been able to determine so far, was the air traffic control system at Reagan National overstretched?
We don't have any determination on that at this point. We've got a team that's been stood up of a number of professionals that represent not only the unions, the air traffic controllers, along with the individuals that handle the technology in the cab itself. So all that will be a lot of the data points that will come together into our final report.
And any determination of whether the helicopter was flying too high? There have been some reports of that it was at 400 feet instead of 200 feet.
There's some separation that's normally happening within what we call these highways on the sky, and that has to do with not only altitude but also speed. But you have to remember there's also the ability for controllers to say give some direction to move in and out of that highway, if you may say. That'll be one aspect that we'll look at in addition to the airplane, which was originally on approach to runway 1, then was asked to change to runway 33, which is a normal procedure, but when and how that happens, it all paints into, again, all of those data points that come out in the final investigation.
How long do you expect this investigation to take?
As long as it takes. We will be on scene here doing all the recovery of the perishable evidence that we need for as long as it takes. Now, the preliminary report we believe will be out in 30 days, but in the cases of these major investigations, it will take a year, if not more, for us to come to a final probable cause. But the most important thing is the work doesn't just end then. We make recommendations so that we don't have tragedies like this again in the future.
President Trump has already reached a conclusion. He said it was DEI policies that led to this disaster. Do you agree with that?
I think there's been a lot of people that have given different opinions on this, and we take all of that information in. What we look to are the experts in each one of their individual fields in these working groups, and collectively the board comes out with a probable cause. And again, we just don't want these tragedies to occur, so we make recommendations. And sometimes it takes 5-10 years, but we haven't stopped. We've got a great reputation, and we're going to continue to do that.
So you can't make any conclusions right now?
The only conclusion I know is that last night we met with several hundred family members who lost their loved ones in the Potomac. We don't need that to happen anymore. We're going to work. We're going to continue. We're going to find out what happened, and we're going to try to stop it from happening again.
This guy was great. I mean, what a true professional, and I don't think he got sucked in from the politics of the question he was asked. He answered it so professionally. And, look, people say things that they're unqualified to say, but here is a professional he would give me confidence that the truth is going to come out at some point. Maybe not next week, maybe not 6 months from now, but probably more like a year from now. But this is the type of professional we want investigating something like this, Mike.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who you voted for in 2024. It doesn't matter what you think of the president or the former president for that matter. What matters is that you need a clear and true investigation as to what exactly happened to the best of our human abilities. And we have to live with the answers that we uncover. And that should be about it. There should be no talk about politics whatsoever in this investigation. It doesn't belong there. And as that gentleman said, what does he know to be true? He knows that, he met with several hundred people who lost their loved ones. And that must have been one heck of part of the job to try to explain to them and give them some comfort, because that is something that will haunt you for the rest of your life when you have to do that sort of thing. And I pray for that person, because he's got one heck of a job ahead of him.
Even Mike, the NTSB guy, got all choked up.
Yeah.
When he started talking about meeting with the families. That's got to be horrific, someone these young skaters, these young Army guys, the pilots and those professionals, they're young men, one of them, I believe, had a 1-year-old kid. So it's that there are faces to these tragedies, and when you deal with these faces, it's so difficult. Choosy heretics choose Carnation Revolution now. Personally, I don't like the government or the airport where I live, and I also told all the people in uniform about Carnation Revolution and made friends and allies for life. Some people agree with you, Mike. Christine agrees with you. I don't know in
Thank you.
regards to what you said, but she does agree with you. Fairy Tale Lane at Helen, the military does not just allow someone a job. You're right, Fairy Tale Lane. But I guess what people are getting all tied up with is that, you hope that the very best people are in the most difficult jobs that require the most competence, and that you hope that the most competent are in these positions. Certainly you wouldn't want helicopter pilots not to be the very best, and even with having the very best, mistakes can be made and accidents can absolutely occur. And we're all aware of that.
And we are learning more about the victims on board the plane and helicopter. Whit Johnson is in Washington, D.C. with the latest for us. Good morning, Whit.
Michael, good morning to you. There is an overwhelming sense of grief as this tragedy has touched so many different communities. At least 2 of the victims were as young as 12 years old, some dying alongside their parents. And we've been speaking with loved ones who are determined to keep their memories alive.
This morning, we're beginning to see the faces and hear the stories of the 67 lives lost in that fiery crash over the Potomac. Flight 5342's first officer, Samuel Lilly, was just 29 years old and newly engaged. Tiffany Gibson telling ABC News her little brother was a kind soul.
He was young, he was so young, and he was excited about life and his future and getting a dog and a house and kids. And this is just tragic.
Ian Epstein, one of 2 flight attendants on board, was a father and husband. His family saying in a statement he loved being a flight attendant because he truly enjoyed traveling and meeting new people, but his true love was his family. Elizabeth Keys being remembered as a strong, fearless woman who embraced life at full speed. She was killed on her 33rd birthday, returning home early from a business trip so she could go on a date with her longtime partner, David. Kia Duggins, a civil rights attorney, set to become a professor at Howard University Law School in the fall. Howard saying that Duggins dedicated her career to fighting against unconstitutional policing and unjust money bail practices. And U.S. figure skating mourning the loss of at least 14 athletes, coaches, and family members who were returning from a training camp. 12-year-old Brielle Byer, a cancer survivor, was with her mother, Justina. Andy Byer telling me his daughter, Brielle, could light up any room.
She was just such a fighter in everything she did, and she just lived life to the fullest with everything. She was so proud of herself in figure skating, and I will miss that so much.
Spencer Lane, killed along with his mom, Christine, was a 16-year-old figure skating phenom. His father, Doug, says he was unstoppable.
Was a force of nature. He just had amazing athletic abilities and just was someone who you couldn't make him do something, but if he was like, hey, that's interesting to me, you couldn't stop him.
Married Boston Skating Club coaches and former world champions Zhenya Shishkova and Vadim Nomov, seen here competing in 1996. Friends calling their deaths a tremendous loss for the skating community.
Just one of a kind. They cared about their athletes and were world champions themselves, and they were just champions in life.
Now, removing victims from the wreckage is an incredibly delicate process. Sources tell us they have ceased diving operations for now until they can lift entire parts of the fuselage to the surface of the river.
So, folks, that's putting a human face on it. And if that doesn't get to you watching this, and just throw out all politics and think for a second of human beings and the great loss that occurred for these with 67 people killed in this accident. Just absolutely horrific. I see a lot of new people in the chat today. I just want to implore you guys to hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button. And this is True Crime from a Police Perspective. Mike, your final thoughts.
That what we need to concentrate on is those families and withhold judgment about what happened until we get the report. But keep those families in your prayers because they certainly need it.
Well said, Mike, 100%. Well, that's our report for today, guys, on this horrific accident in D.C. Have a great day, everyone. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. We'll see you next time. God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.